The reception hall was beautiful. Flowers everywhere. Laughter. The smell of jollof rice and expensive perfume. But Auntie Ngozi was not smiling. She stood near the bar, wine glass in hand, watching Felix wheel Stephanie across the dance floor. And then she leaned toward the woman beside her and said it, loud enough to be heard. He married her out of pity. A whole fine man like that, settling for a disabled woman who cannot even stand on her own 2 feet. Give it 1 year, he will be gone. The table went quiet. Stephanie heard every word. Felix heard every word. What happened next did not just silence Auntie Ngozi. It dismantled everything she thought she understood about that marriage. But not in the way anyone expected. Because nobody in that room knew who Stephanie Eze really was. Not even Felix. Not yet. Because the woman in that wheelchair was hiding something that would change the meaning of everything in that room.
Stephanie Eze had a rule. One rule. And she had kept it for 3 years without breaking. No man would ever know her last name before the 3rd date. Not because she was ashamed of it, but because of what it carried. Chief Benson Eze, her father, a man who had built a real estate and logistics empire across Lagos, Abuja, and London before he died of a heart attack at 61, leaving everything to his only daughter. Everything. Stephanie had learned what that word did to men. She had watched them change, watched the softness leave their eyes and something calculating move in. So she built a life that looked ordinary, a small interior design consultancy in East London, a modest flat in Hackney. A wheelchair she had used since a car accident 4 years ago fractured her L3 vertebra. The doctors had been honest with her. With intensive physiotherapy, she could regain significant mobility, maybe even walk again. Stephanie had done the physiotherapy, quietly, privately, and told nobody else, except Fumi. Fumi was the kind of friend who took secrets to her grave. "You are mad," Fumi had said the night Stephanie showed her she could stand. "Completely and totally mad." "I know," Stephanie said, "but I need to know he loves me, the real me, not the money, not the legs, just me." Fumi had gone quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Then you'd better make sure he is worth it."
It was a dinner party in Islington. November. Cold enough outside to make the warmth inside feel like a gift. Stephanie had come because Fumi begged her. She had planned to stay 1 hour. She stayed 4. Felix Harrow was not the most handsome man in the room. He was not the loudest. He was not performing for anyone. He was just sitting at the end of the table, listening to someone's story about a building project in Manchester, asking questions that showed he had actually been paying attention. Stephanie noticed that. She noticed the way he laughed, not too much, not trying to impress, just genuine. They were introduced by the host. Felix shook her hand, looked her in the eye, did not look at the wheelchair, not even once. That alone made her uneasy, because men who ignored it completely were often the ones pretending the hardest. That was the first thing. The second thing happened at the end of the night. The lift in the building was broken. There were 6 steps down to the exit. 3 other men had already looked away. Felix simply walked over. "Would you like a hand?" Not rushing, not making it a big moment, just asking. Stephanie looked at him for a long second. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." He helped her down the steps carefully, then stepped back. No lingering, no waiting for praise. He just went back to saying his goodbyes. Stephanie sat outside in the cold and felt something shift quietly in her chest. Something she had not felt in a very long time. And for the first time, she was not sure if she wanted him to pass the test or fail it quickly.
Their first date was a restaurant in Soho. Felix had called ahead, not to make a reservation. Well, yes, that too, but also to confirm the entrance was step-free and that the bathroom was accessible. Stephanie found out from the manager when she complimented the layout. "The gentleman who made your reservation called yesterday," the manager said cheerfully. "He wanted to make sure everything would be comfortable for you." Stephanie said nothing, but something inside her went very still. The dates continued. Felix never made her disability the subject, never talked about it like it was something to overcome, never looked at her with that particular expression, the one that mixed pity with admiration in a way that made her feel like a charity case. He just treated her like a woman, his woman. By the 3rd month, she told him her last name, Eze. He nodded. Nice name. That was all. She had a quiet alert system linked to her name online, a tool a friend in tech had helped her set up years ago. If anyone searched Chief Benson Eze and cross-referenced her consultancy, she would know. Felix did not search that night, or the next night, or the night after. It was 2 weeks later, after she mentioned her father offhandedly, that he finally looked. She watched the notification come in, sat with it, waited to see if he would change. He called her the next morning. Same voice, same Felix. "I looked up your dad last night," he said. "He built something incredible. You must miss him." That was it. No questions about the estate, no subtle repositioning, just, "You must miss him." And in that moment she realized this man was either completely genuine or dangerously good at pretending. Stephanie sat in her kitchen in Hackney and cried for the first time in 2 years. By month 5, he had met Fumi. Fumi had pulled Stephanie aside afterward and said, "Okay, I see it." By month 7, he proposed. No grand gesture, no restaurant full of strangers, just the 2 of them on the sofa, a film neither of them was watching, and Felix turning to her with a small box and very steady hands. "I don't need you to be anything other than what you are. I just need you to let me stay." Stephanie looked at this man, this ordinary, extraordinary man, and said yes. The ceremony was at a small venue in Richmond. Ivory flowers, afternoon light through tall windows. Stephanie wore white, simple, elegant, a diamond tiara that had belonged to her mother. Felix stood at the altar and watched her come down the aisle the way a man watches something he still cannot believe is real. His best man leaned over and whispered something. Felix didn't hear it. He was looking at Stephanie. Only Stephanie. The vows were traditional, but when Felix reached the part, in sickness and in health, he paused, just for a moment, and looked at her, and smiled, like it was a private joke between them, like it meant something only they understood. Stephanie gripped her bouquet and thought, soon he will know everything, and when he does, everything will either deepen or collapse. The reception was loud and warm, the way Nigerian receptions always are. Auntie Ngozi had flown in from Lagos 3 days earlier, Chief Benson Eze's younger sister, a woman who had opinions about everything and the volume to match. She had pulled Stephanie aside the morning of the wedding. "Are you sure about this Oyibo man?" she had asked. "What does he even bring to this marriage? You are Benson Eze's daughter. This is not how we do things." Stephanie had smiled. "I love him, Auntie." Ngozi had hissed. "Love. Love does not build a family." Now, at the reception, Auntie Ngozi stood near the bar, wine glass in hand, watching Felix wheel Stephanie across the dance floor. The way he bent to say something in her ear, the way she laughed, Ngozi's mouth tightened. She leaned toward the woman beside her, a distant cousin visiting from Enugu, and said it. He married her out of pity. A whole fine man like that, settling for a disabled woman who cannot even stand on her own 2 feet. Give it 1 year, he will be gone. The table went quiet. The cousin looked uncomfortable. And then a shadow fell across the table. Felix was standing there, Stephanie beside him. Neither of them had been on the dance floor. They had been 3 feet away. A few heads at nearby tables turned. The air shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. The silence stretched.
Felix looked at Auntie Ngozi, not with anger, something quieter than anger, something that did not need to raise its voice. "I heard what you said," he said. Ngozi lifted her chin. "Then you heard the truth." Felix nodded slowly. "Let me tell you something about your niece," he said. "She researched every structural project I have ever worked on before our second date. She learned the name of my mother's dog and asked about him every single week. She sat with me in a hospital waiting room for 6 hours when my father had his procedure and never once made me feel like I owed her for it." He paused. "The wheelchair is not what you think it is, and Stephanie is not who you think she is. But even if she were exactly what you imagine, a disabled woman with nothing, she would still be the only person I have ever wanted to build a life with." He looked at Ngozi one last time. "So, with respect, your 1-year prediction is going to embarrass you, not because you are wrong about men, but because you are completely wrong about her." He turned back to Stephanie, took her hand, and wheeled her calmly toward the dance floor. The table remained silent. Auntie Ngozi stared at her wine glass. The cousin from Enugu was pretending to check her phone. Fumi, watching from across the room, pressed her hand to her mouth and thought, "Oh, Steph, tell him tonight. This man has earned it."
The hotel suite was in Mayfair. Stephanie had booked it. Felix had offered to split the cost. She had smiled and said she had it covered. He had not argued. That was Felix. Now the room was quiet. Soft lamplight, the city humming distantly below. Felix sat on the edge of the bed, jacket off, tie loosened, still carrying the warmth of the evening on his face. Stephanie positioned her wheelchair a few feet in front of him. "Felix," she said, "I need to tell you some things." He looked up. "Okay. 2 things," she said, "and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." He nodded. She took a breath. "The first thing, my father did not just leave me the flat in Hackney. He left me everything. The properties in Lagos, the ones in Abuja, the logistics company, the portfolio here in London." She watched his face. "We are talking about tens of millions, Felix. I am not a woman who runs a small consultancy. That consultancy is real. I built it myself. I am proud of it. But it is not the whole picture, not even close." Felix was very still. "How much?" he asked quietly. "The last valuation," Stephanie said, "was £43 million. The room was silent. Felix looked at the floor, then back at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because of what it does to people," she said. "I have watched it happen. I needed to know you were real. I needed to know that what you felt for me had nothing to do with what I was worth." Felix was quiet for a long moment. "And the second thing?" he asked. Stephanie looked at him, and then she placed both hands on the armrests, and she stood up. There was no warning, no shift in expression. Slowly, steadily, on her own 2 feet, and walked toward him. Each step quiet, deliberate, irreversible. Felix did not move. He could not move. He watched her cross the room, step by step, until she was standing directly in front of him. His eyes were wet. "Steph, I fractured my spine 4 years ago," she said, "but I recovered, mostly. I kept the wheelchair because I was afraid. Every man I had ever trusted had wanted something from me. The chair kept the wrong ones away, and I told myself, if someone could love me in that chair, without the money, without the legs, then I would know. I would finally know." Felix stood up slowly. He was taller than her, but in that moment, he looked at her like she was the strongest thing he had ever seen in his life. He whispered, How long have you been able to walk?" Stephanie looked at him. 14 months, she said. 14 months of knowing and not knowing if I could trust it. I have been walking in private for 14 months, waiting for a man worth standing up for. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything they had built, everything she had protected, everything he had never asked for. Felix reached out and took her face in his hands, and when he spoke, His voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't care about the money. I never will. But Stephanie, watching you walk toward me just now, that is the most honest thing anyone has ever given me." She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 4 years, Stephanie Eze did not feel like a woman hiding behind anything. She just felt like herself, loved fully, finally. Auntie Ngozi flew back to Lagos 2 days later. She did not say goodbye to Felix. But at the airport, she pulled Stephanie into a long, tight hug and whispered, "Your father would have liked him." She did not wait for a response. She just walked through the gate. Fumi was the maid of honor at the 1-year anniversary dinner. Felix gave a toast. He talked about the night in Islington, the broken lift, the 6 steps. He said, "I thought I was helping her down those steps. I had no idea she was the one who would carry me." Stephanie laughed and reached across the table and took his hand. Some people spend their whole lives looking for a love that sees them clearly. Stephanie Eze spent 4 years building a test so precise that only one man in the world could pass it. He didn't even know he was being tested. He showed up without knowing he was being measured. Every single time. And that was always going to be enough. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are new here, welcome to Life Stories with the Innocent. We tell the stories that stay with you.